Let me, on behalf of Elsevier, welcome everyone to our Flash Science Talks. And today we are honored to be joined by Professor Veena Sahajwalla, who is a global star in the field of recycling science and the founding director of the Center for Sustainable Materials Research and Technology at the University of New South Wales in Australia, as well as heading the Australian Research Council Industrial Transformation Research Hub for Green Manufacturing. Actually, in 2018, I had the privilege to visit the Smart Center when you launched the world's first electronic waste microfactory in the presence of the Australian Minister of the Environment. So I'm very excited to have you here and also to hear more about the progress of this. Of your work. And without further ado, let's go into our discussion. So Veena, can I ask to give a brief introduction to yourself and the work of the Smart Center?
Thank you very much, Anders, for the opportunity to be a participant in your talks. It's an absolute honor for me, for us, the work that we do in recycling and our work that has been published, of course, through Elsevier has been very humbling because it's given us a tremendous opportunity to show some of the world-leading science that we're doing here at the Smart Center at UNSW in Sydney. Smart Center is very much about looking at the fundamental science around sustainability of materials. So whether it's about the materials science, the transformation of materials, and understanding how materials can be recycled and reformed into new applications, where the starting material is predominantly waste, is really been the focus. So you can say, in short, we're looking at waste to value. And the ability to show that we are transforming waste into value-added materials and products can't just stop at the fundamental science. So the other part of the work we do at Smart Center is focused on technology. And so both the science and technological advances are part of the focus here at the Smart Center. And we're really privileged that at UNSW, we've got tremendous support to not only do our research, but also to have the opportunity to run our own pilot microfactories.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. We'll come back to that in a short while. Just to focus a bit on the broader context of your work and the SDGs, I think one of the SDGs that you're directly targeting is the SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So can you elaborate a bit around that? And again, you may have mentioned, and I know that it's part of the circular economy, right? So can you
Yes,
elaborate
yes.
a bit further around the SDG connection?
Yes, well, look, absolutely. SDG 12 is a very good, vehicle through which we can really highlight and showcase our work on recycling. But I like the key words in there. It's both talking about consumption and production. And that's really why we're so, privileged in a way that our work nicely delivers into some of the impact that SDG 12 has the potential to deliver across the world, where we are not just looking at recycling of materials for the sake of recycling, and that's an important thing to do in its own right. But equally coupled with that, what we are talking about is production and manufacturing, and really showing that waste resources, if they are to be thought about as resources and materials for recycling, they have to connect very closely with manufacturing. So the important work around aligning both recycling and manufacturing is an important goal for us at UNSW at the Smart Center. So we want to showcase that if we are to ultimately help the world, address this global challenge of waste, and what we do with waste is not just to think about one dimension of recycling, but we've got to see it as a multifaceted challenge. That how do we see it as recycling, but for what purpose? So it's got to be fit for purpose, which means if we're going to be redirecting it into manufacturing, then we need to know that our waste materials, which are our resources, can actually be understood from a fundamental point of view, both material science as well as manufacturing and its transformation into value-added production. And this is where, of course, we go right back to sustainable, of course, consumption and production, which is what SDG 12 is really all about. The whole responsible consumption and production has that other keyword in it, responsible. That means we're all responsible through our actions, whether we are in the field of research or industry or policy and government. It's all of us working together in a way that we value and respect each other's contribution, so that in our own work, we can deliver to creating this impact that is so important.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned in the last sentence and also in your introduction is that you're working very closely with industry and policymakers as well. Can you go a bit into both the challenges around that as well as the opportunities? Because clearly you have been able to work with, I think, quite traditional industries in some sense, and you have invented the green steel. And I think steel industries, in some respect, have been relatively traditional as well as quite inventive. Can you elaborate a bit on this, your collaborations across borders?
Yes, no, that's a very good question, Anders, because I think, when we think about collaboration, really breaking those boundaries, those traditional boundaries, and really, looking at how research can have an impact and delivery of that impact through collaborations with industries, whether they are traditional industries, like in this case with the steel industry, and our work on green steel has actually shown that you can work with industries that have been around. In our case, one of our industry partners here in Newcastle in Australia has been around for 100 years. So if you think about, an industry like that, that is wanting to actually be a world leader with green steel and wanting to partner with us through our journey of science and discovery and innovation, I think goes to show that it doesn't matter, how old you are as an industry, you can always innovate and you can always show to the rest of the world that you are prepared to embrace new ideas. So I think that's such an important point, that we assume that some of the industries that are, shall we say, traditional industries, they are too old and they can't innovate. And I would absolutely disagree with that, because I think our green steel has shown that it is possible. And the journey that we have embarked on with our steel partners in using waste materials as a resource. So in this particular case, replacing coal and coke as a material for injection into electric arc furnace steelmaking with rubber tires that inject material. Why rubber tires are working so well is all part and parcel of fundamental discovery. But the fact that we've shown that it's working so well in an actual industrial process goes to show that the science works. And why does the science work was all about the discovery that materials like waste tires actually contain considerably more hydrogen compared to traditional coal and coke. So here we go. When we talk about hydrogen, when we talk about hydrogen economy, the important question to ask is, what are the pathways? How are you actually going to discover new mechanisms by which hydrogen is generated and delivered at the point of impact, at the point of consumption? And in this case, our technology of polymer injection technology, or PIT for short, has shown that by injecting rubber tires into electric arc furnace steelmaking, we are actually delivering hydrogen in situ and doing microgeneration right in situ inside the steelmaking furnace, where it is actually being utilized to carry out the kinds of reactions that a steelmaker wants. But the important outcome from that is we can absolutely reduce our carbon footprint. So reducing our dependency on traditional carbon resources actually is part of the goal here. But you have to then ask the question, can we achieve that in practice? Back to that important question, in helping steelmakers deliver all of our goals, we want to reduce our carbon footprint, we do need to bring along all industries with us. And I think to me, that's the beauty of collaboration, where science, industry, and policy can intersect.
Yeah. So to follow up a bit on that, because if we look at the world's biggest carbon emitters, they may not be in Australia. So in that sense, can you tell a bit how you have been working as well with the collaboration to, let's say, some of the emerging economies? And I guess the concept of microfactories is quite important in that respect. Would be very
Yeah.
interesting to hear.
Yes, absolutely. And when you think about the impact of technologies like green steel potentially could have, on other parts of the world, our industry partners and us here at UNSW are very much committed to looking at how these technologies can be exported and can be delivered to other parts of the world. So it's not just about implementation in Australia, but very much that commitment on behalf of our industry collaborators as well as UNSW to really take this technology out to the world. And likewise, when we are thinking about some of the new and emerging technologies like microfactories, which look at recycling of materials like waste glass and textile, again, a very important question for countries, not just Australia, but other parts of the world, where we might talk about, all the challenges we faced with waste textiles and the issues that we all have to deal with. How do you actually ultimately deliver something that's practically a solution that can be deployed? And this is where microfactories can play such an important role. And from our perspective at UNSW, our microfactories, our pilot facility that we have running at UNSW is a way to demonstrate that research out of our labs can be translated into practice in a small operation. That's what a microfactory is all about. And these small operations can actually be deployed anywhere in the world. And indeed, to show that we can walk our talk, not only have we got our own pilot facility that we run at UNSW as a demonstration site, but we're also now having our own microfactory, which we run in partnership with the industry outside UNSW. Yep. So our first microfactory outside UNSW with glass and textiles has just in fact been launched right here in Australia.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
One thing to go back to a bit is the support from the university environment, in this case UNSW. How important has that been, and what would be your, let's say, your advice to other universities in order to be able to create that supporting environment where you can have these pilot facilities on a university campus potentially? Or can you elaborate a bit on that? What would be your advice?
Yeah, I'm sure there are many universities who have considered and looked at pilot facilities and having those pilot facilities on site. And I think, of course, one will expect that universities will look at that very carefully because, resources and space and all of these usual challenges are always going to be there. But I would encourage other universities to see this pilot line and the opportunity to do piloting work as a way, as a vehicle to show how impact can actually be delivered in a real world setting. And I think to me, it's a beautiful example of how taking the science out of traditional labs and delivering, pilot lines and showcasing to the world how your research can be translated into practice is an important responsibility that I think universities can play a very important part in, so that your contribution to the world is not just seen through the vehicle of science and the research, which of course is absolutely important to deliver academic impact, as we do, of course. But I think also equally importantly, to start to bring others on the journey, because when we think about people in industry and government, they are the ones who will be making decisions, important decisions on how to deploy technologies, how to deliver on policy and regulations. And I think to me, for policymakers, for people in industry who make choices, it's very important to see some of these pilot facilities up and running. And I think, to me, that's going to deliver a lot of confidence in investors, in governments, to look at something like that and go, that I can see this research operating. And that's why for us, it's been very important when our own government ministers who've come in and played a role in, yes, they have a look, they do the launch. I think that's been important for us at UNSW to showcase to the government, who we are and what we do. And we are, also bringing industries on that journey, because as end users of technology, they need to be able to see that these kinds of industrial scale production is possible. But I think microfactories are really making it so much more accessible. Many small businesses who are just only doing collecting and sorting of waste are now looking at setting up their own microfactories. And for us, that collaboration with a regional operator right here in Cootamundra in Australia is a really good example of the microfactory that we have just launched, where our operator used to be a collector of waste, and now he's become a manufacturer.
Very interesting, and I think that will be quite a scalable concept to look at. We'll certainly link to that once we publish this. We are doing this in quite a brief time, so I basically have just the final question at this stage, and maybe it's a bit of a personal question, in the sense you seem to have quite an amazing drive and focus in your work. If you were to give an advice to any young scientist who wants to work in your own very highly interdisciplinary area, from your own experience, what would be the things they should think about?
No, very good question, Anders, because I think going back, and when I start to think about some of the early years, at the start of my journey, when a lot of this fundamental science really had to be done, it wasn't just enough to say, well, let's recycle. You can't expect that people are going to jump on board till the science, has actually been done. So when you're starting out on your journey, you will often find that there will be perhaps some people who will be skeptical and challenge the fact that, a lot of these innovative ideas, can't be delivered in an industrial scale. I think that was certainly one of the challenges that I faced. That even if the experiments work in the lab, that they may not necessarily work on an industrial scale. And I think, we have to go into it knowing that, yes, there will be challenges, and yes, it will not be easy. But I think this is where that partnership and collaboration with people outside, whether it's in industry, whether it's industries in your own country or anywhere in the world, to reach out to people who might have listened to your talk at a conference and really, or have read your paper and have shown an interest, to reach out to talk to people in industry, to show that yes, you are indeed very keen on collaboration with industry, and I think make the time to have scientific engagements, but also make the time to bring research collaborators on that journey with you, so that when challenging questions come up which may fall outside your area, you can indeed showcase that indeed there are many incredibly smart people across the world who are also excited about the work and are keen to collaborate. So our Australian Research Council research hub that has been funded through ARC here in Australia is an example that I can point to, where we've got collaborators across the country, of course, researchers from different universities, but also in addition to research collaborators, we've got industry partners. And I think it's been a fantastic journey for all of us, and we will continue to forge ahead and grow our collaborations, not just here in Australia, but as we move forward into the next chapter, collaborators from across the world.
Thank you, Veena. I think this was a fantastic end to our interview, but I don't think it's an end to the work you're doing, which is really, really important for us, for the SDGs and beyond, and also in terms of inspiring others to join your journey. So thank you very much. And I stop there for our interview. And again, Veena, thank you very much.
Thank you.